Welcome to Python Friends. It is week one, day one. What a time to be alive. Apple's WWDC was today, so that's always a good start to our day. As a developer, we get to learn all about cool things. And today we get to learn about the coolest thing, and that is Python. I'm really glad you guys are here. You guys can be a part of this. We got a ton to go over, so we're going to kind of jump in. Just want to introduce myself. My name is Will. I've been an instructor here for quite a while. Love Coding Dojo, love Python. It's probably my favorite language to teach other than like algorithms for JavaScript. Love those, but Python definitely takes the cake for my favorite language to learn and teach because you can do so many things with it. You can do machine learning. You can do, image recognition. You can scrape the internet and create very quick like applications that can have voice activation like within a day. It's incredible. There's so many libraries. There's so many things to do. Python is really, really just an incredible language. So I'm excited for you guys to kind of start diving into that. I did want to introduce Mel. Mel is going to be our TA. Mel, do you want to say, a lot of you guys met her in the office hour. Do you want to say anything? I'm just putting you on the spot. Totally my fault. Meant to tell you that. Say anything. Just kind of introduce
Uh,
yourself.
I'm Mel, and I'm a graduate of the Coding Dojo. I did Python and Burn, and I'm just, feel free to reach out directly to me on Discord for any help you guys need. I'm a dedicated TA to this class. So, and if we hit a wall, I'll point you in the right direction. But I'm just happy to be here and happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mel's awesome. So if you have anything or any questions, feel free to ask myself, ask Mel. We are here to help you. That's literally what we get paid to do. So I always tell students, use us, ask questions. A lot of students always have kind of a fear of asking questions, but really you guys pay Coding Dojo to pay me and Mel to teach you guys. So please, please, please ask us questions. We love to teach. That's why we do it. That's why we're here. So please ask questions there. I do want to bring up, there's quite a few things that we're just going to jump into right now. And it's kind of an overhaul. So over this past week, I hope that you guys had a ton of time just to kind of, get used to, or just kind of rest, sorry, to kind of rest this past week. We didn't have any classes. We didn't have any assignments, anything of that nature. So I hope that this time was restful and good for you. During that time, Coding Dojo did an entire program overhaul. Now, you guys have been made aware of it. It's not that I'm telling you this for the first time. There was agreements you guys had to sign, all that good stuff. But I just wanted to make sure that we do go through it. That way, you guys fully understand and know um, everything that is expected of you moving forward. It's not just my class. It's just Coding Dojo as a whole. It's not just, your class. It is literally us as a company are doing this. So really wanted to make sure that we point all of those things out. I did also send an email today with This Week in Python, week one. I'll be sending that out every Monday, just kind of telling you what we're going to be going over, your core assignments, XYZ, and what our lectures are going to look like. So if you have any questions or if you didn't receive that, feel free to reach out to myself or Mel on the chat, and then we can make sure that we do get you added in there, but everybody should have access to that. First thing I want to point out is your discussion posts. We have changed the way that we do discussion posts for the better, but also can be a little bit more stressful. Moving forward, you are only required to do 2 discussion posts a week, just 2. What's nice about it is instead of having to do them on the specific day of Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, they are now open until Sunday, 11:59 p.m. You can do them anytime between Monday morning at 12 a.m. or Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So make sure you do those. You will see that there are 3 assignments or 3 discussion posts. You only have to do 2 of them. You don't get extra credit for doing 3, so just focus on doing 2. One thing I want to point out, typically what we've had is if you missed some discussion posts, there was some sort of makeup time. Maybe it was the end of week 4 or what, just end of week 4 because you guys are all coming from web fundamentals. If you're retaking, it was end of week 4 and week 8 in Python. We have changed that. It's a compliance thing. We were told we had to change it. And so now moving forward, there is no, I repeat, there is no makeups for discussions. Either you do it that week or you don't. Now, the bad thing about that is, I mean, the good thing is you have an entire week. So, and you only have to do 2 out of 3. So that's great. There's ample opportunity. Bad thing is you have to be at 80% completion rate in order to pass the class. There is, it's an 8-week course, 2 per week. So there's 16 total discussion posts. You have to be at 80%. That puts you at 13 discussion posts that have to be done. If you miss more than 3, so if you miss 4, let's say first 2 weeks, you just forget to do it, you will have to retake the course. Nothing, there's no makeups, there's nothing I can do as an instructor. So please, please, please make sure that you do your discussion posts. Just set a timer on Monday morning, knock 2 of them out. Don't worry about it. There is no makeups. You have to do 13 in order to pass. If you get to the point where you miss 4 total, you will have to retake the course, even if it's week 2. So any questions on discussion posts? Also, they all have to be accessed from Learning Platform 3, the new one. I put that again in our email. Any questions on those?
Yeah, this is Nathan Denny.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey, when I was doing the web fundamentals, I had a lot of trouble getting the discussion questions in. Just the platform would like forget them.
Sure.
So I had to post again and again and again a bunch of times.
Mhm.
So just if for whatever reason, can we send them to you that week just to say, hey, it's sorry,
No, you're totally fine.
quarantining in Japan right now.
No, you're fine. That's
There's an
awesome that you're in
announcement.
Japan.
Yeah.
What I would say is, be in constant communication. I know that you and Zach worked well together, and I know that you worked with Zach a lot. So if that's the case, if there is an issue, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll make sure immediately that we get it fixed for you. If that is the case, right, just let's make sure that it's all taken care of. And if that's not the case, then let's talk. And especially for you, Nathan, maybe this first week, just go ahead and take a screenshot of your submission. And then on Monday, when I go and update it, if that is not there, then we can have a conversation. But I think we've worked with our developers to where you should be fine. But if that's the case for anybody, if you put it there and it's not there, please reach out to me, because that is crucial. But I would just say that take a screenshot, and if you get it counted on Monday, then delete it personally, because if you just come and say, oh, I just didn't save it, if that's the first time you've ever had that issue, I don't know that that'll fly. So I would just take a screenshot for at least the first one, make sure it's all good to go. But again, you can miss 3. So there's that. Any questions on that? Any other questions? Cool. Next thing I want to talk about is our assignments. So we have changed the way we do assignments. There are now new requirements. And I just want to point this out. There are now 3 types. I put this in the email today as well. There's now 3 types of assignments. There are our optional assignments, we have practice assignments, and we have core assignments. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what's the difference? Practice assignments are things that we think that you should do absolutely. But everybody is used to getting a email on Monday or Tuesday that says, here's where you're at numbers wise. We will only focus on core assignments, core assignment submissions. So if you look here, there's actually a new place in your platform, just in the Python section, you should see stack orientation. Under the requirements, you will see kind of your attendance. And then here's this required is 90% of core assignments. So it's now no longer the 70%. It is now 90% of core. Good news is there's a lot less assignments you have to do. Now, I would still suggest absolutely do practice. Oops, shouldn't have done that. Absolutely do practice. You need to do those. But from a compliance side, it's just the core that we are grading / making sure that you're submitting. and there are 12 total assignments. So that means that throughout this time, you have got to submit at least 11 core assignments in order to pass. So please, again, note, you will get an email, and that is every week. Keep up with the core. If you get below 90%, you will, if you're between like 60 and 90%, then you are kind of on watch, basically. And if you get below 50%, then you can get on academic probation. So basically, if you only do one of these core, you're already starting off in academic probation. So each week, your focus should be to do all the assignments, but really definitely should be to finish the core assignments of that week in order for you to, be in compliance there. Somebody asked, I noticed today that Python loops predict assignment is not on that spreadsheet. What is its classification? Oh, that's great question. It would be a practice. It's not a core. So Kevin, Python loops would be a practice. Joseph asked, I don't have any information in my stack orientation dropdown. Is anyone else? Joseph, if you could actually send me a screenshot, just email me that. I'll put my email and I can reach out to our development team.
Hey, Will, does it say like which one are core and which one are practice, or it just say
Yeah.
requirement?
So yeah. So if you look here and you see, so those are just practice. Oh, it should say core. So see how it says optional? It should say core. I will.
Yeah, because I have like type requirement in the core that I know I requirement in the option. That's all I have.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So let me write that down. Give me a second. I can look at that. I would say right now, as you are doing this, go off of this assignment checklist. This should be, again, this is in your Google Doc. Just click this assignment checklist. This is what you should be focusing on right now. But I will add a note. It says core is for assignment. Okay, I've added a note. So yeah, focus on this right here.
Function intermediate.
Yeah, Taylor, same thing. That's kind of what we're talking about is right now you don't see it in the platform, but this assignment checklist is up to date and where you need to be at, just to know what is core and what is practice. So go off of this. Again, this is located in your Google Doc. I sent this in your welcome email. This is also on our Discord as well. But yeah, send me a screenshot if you're not seeing anything there, Joseph, and I can make sure that that is up to date and fixed for you. Yes. So again, that in that learn section, you can see the requirements here. And this is in order to graduate as well. You have to have a 90% core assignment completion. Now, one thing I really want to focus on is you cannot take the exam until you reach that 90%. So if you were the type that's trying to take it at the end and get assignments after the exam, I can't give you the exam until you've reached up to 90%, which is 11 out of the 12 core assignments. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. As you are doing this, you have to do core assignments in order to even try the exam. So any questions there other than what we've already discussed? I would still say as a developer, the best thing for you would be continue to do those practice, the ones that used to be kind of the mandatory ones. Those will help you. The thought is that you as developers will be doing those, which kind of leads up to these core assignments, which are a little bit bigger. But it also is a little bit nicer because now there's not necessarily as many assignments that are required. Now it's 12 instead of like 35, right? Which is really nice. But it's just a little bit, those come with a little bit more weight there. Cool. Yeah. So we already talked about the stack orientation tab. If you don't see anything here, then please let me know. But you should see that. And again, the exams, it shows this is kind of the rule. This is a new tab. You'll see it on everything when you go to projects and algorithms. If you go to a new language, it's going to be there as well. It's kind of our zero tolerance, coming here with professionalism, what cheating on exams looks like, all that stuff to not do. One thing I also want to point out is we have moved from Mattermost. I'm sure most of you guys have seen that. We have moved from Mattermost actually to Discord. And so you all have access in there. I sent it, Devin sent it quite a few times. I've sent it a few times. I sent access to what, like giving you access. So once you're on our server, now I know there's a couple different servers. I know there's one that if you hover over it, it doesn't look like this one looks like a button. The other one's a square. That is a student server. That is not the one that we are saying. That's not the one that we're using. This one is our Coding Dojo server. And in this server, you'll have access to a couple different things. One of those will be Cohort Will. This is where you're going to come and ask questions regarding the class specifically. So like, hey, Will said this, what are we doing? Or if I'm doing a extra lecture on something, hey, what time was that? This is class specific. That's where you put that. If you do have questions, you can just do that in Python notifications or Python PT. Sorry about that. In Python PT, this is also where you can get help. All you have to do, which is really kind of cool, in order to get help, is you just hop in and click help. And what that will do is it'll put you into a room. It'll put you into a room, and then a TA can hop in and say, oh, okay, perfect. I can come in and help you with your question. You can screen share. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. Discord's really great. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's a really, really great tool for that. This is where your TAs are going to be looking. Yep, Albert, you just checked it. This is where TAs are going to look and see if you need help. They're going to hop in here and help you there. So make sure you are doing this with Discord. If you don't see this Cohort Will or you don't have access to it, please let me know, and I can get you access to that. I did pin a message that has access to everything we have. So all you do is go to this pinned messages right here, and you'll see this. This is our lecture room. This is our schedule. This is that Google class sheet that I just showed that has the assignment checklist and everything. If you need to set up a one-on-one with an instructor, if you want to have the TA schedule or algorithm book, you can do all that here. Discussions, you go to this top one, that's LP3. It's this one right here. Do not do the other one right there. And again, this just shows all the information we have. So this is everything for the class, just like in Mattermost when we had our header, same sort of thing. It's just this pinned message. So if you have a question or anything like that of where is the information, just click this little pin on my class and all that will be there. Unfortunately, Discord does not allow for Markdown, which is usually what it made it look really nice, where I could say like Zoom, right? It was a hyperlink. Fortunately, you have to actually see the links, but you work with what you got. Any questions on Discord? Joseph, to your question of all my assignments say core, I'll just go off the assignment checklist. Yes. Just go off the assignment checklist. That should be your holy grail of what assignments are core. That's what I'm going off of when I'm checking your assignments. And again, there are 12 of them. Cool. Any other questions on this stuff? Anybody feeling overwhelmed yet? Just a little. I feel that, Nathan. It's okay. Yeah, this past week was supposed to be a week for instructors to kind of relax a little bit because we teach, month after month after month after month, but it ended up being very hectic because we were switching everything over and we're like, wait, what? That ended up happening. Is there any other questions kind of on this? One thing I do want to point out is if you submitted anything, if you rested, great, good on you. I think rest is really important, especially when it comes to development. And if you did get a chance to submit any assignments over this past week, just please remember that today it restarted everything. So just make sure you go and you submit your assignments, resubmit them. Anything you submitted over dead week, just make sure you resubmit them there. That way it'll show, because right now if you submitted something and then it might still show on your platform that it's submitted, but from my perspective it's not. So make sure you resubmit anything you submitted from 2 Fridays ago until today. If you submitted something today, that's great. This afternoon, that's great. But anything yesterday from 2 Fridays ago, please make sure you resubmit those. Cool. Anything else, friends? All right. So let's just hop into Python. We're going to talk today's going to be a pretty big overview of Python. Just pretty big, kind of really getting our feet wet. Oh, real quick. Nathan said, does that include discussion? Yes, everything. Everything that you did needs to be resubmitted. But we're going to just kind of dip our feet a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about pip, what that is. We're going to talk about virtual environments. I have a backpack here because that's kind of my favorite way to think about what a virtual environment is. We're going to talk about how we're going to run Python kind of moving forward. And then we're going to talk just a little bit about syntax. On Wednesday, we will be talking about functions and dictionaries and lists and how we're going to do kind of these bigger data structures, data types, or how we're going to handle those with the conditionals and how that all works. So today is just a little bit of really focusing, making sure on the overhaul you guys feel good, but then also introducing Python, kind of getting an understanding of it, and kind of starting with the basics to where we'll ramp up on Wednesday, and then it's really just full send from there. Joseph asked, my apologies, what did we have to resubmit from 2 Fridays ago? So anything that you did in the dead week, any assignments or any discussion posts during the dead week, you have to resubmit those. Your platform might still show that it is submitted, but from my side, I don't see that. So I need you to resubmit everything because I have a filter. Basically, I have a filter in the back end that I run, and it is by date. That's how it has to be done. So it's anything starting now. So anything before that, you have to resubmit it. Cool. So let's talk about pip. And pip is our package installer. So you can kind of think about it like this. Everybody, kind of not everybody, but sometimes I don't know if you have those friends who've like got a guy for everything, or female, right? Like, oh, you need tickets to a baseball game? I got a guy. Oh, you need new tires? I know somebody, right? It's basically that pip is that for Python. Pip is a way that we can get any sort of packages we want, whether it's a framework like Django or a micro framework like Flask. If we want to use something like NumPy or do certain different things, it can install those packages, those bits of code, kind of like jQuery, but it can install those for my Python project. Now, pip is not the only package installer. You might see Anaconda is another popular one out there, but pip is the one that we're going to use. It's pretty friendly. It's very friendly. It's easy to use, pretty mainstream. Anaconda is a little bit more data sciencey, like NumPy, working with numbers and graphs and stuff, but both work fine. They're just package installers. It's a way that we can install some code. Yeah, Nathan, it is much longer. It just goes by Conda. So even in my terminal, you might see Conda because I've worked with Anaconda a little bit. But right here, you see Conda, but I'm working with pip. So pip is just our package installer. That is what we are going to use when we install, if you haven't, when we install Django. So what you do, you have your different Python, right? Your different installation. Mac OS automatically installs a older version of Python, but we want to make sure that we are in Python 3. So if you have a Mac, make sure that you are doing something with Python 3. You can use Homebrew, or you can actually go to Python itself and try it. But you want something like Python 3.6.5, something of that nature. Again, if you have issues with Brew, Homebrew had a little bit of issues with Big Sur. And so if you do have some issues, you can just try downloading Python here, get that updated. And if you have Windows, here's where you can download Python directly. And if you want to use Git Bash, here's how you would do that here. So as we start looking at this, we have a few things that we have to download, right, that we want to use. So for this pip, all we do is we say pip or pip3. If you're on a Mac, you might need to use pip3, which is a distinguisher for Python 3 versus Python 2.2 or 2 point whatever. By default it was. But you just say pip3 install and then the package name. Now, we're going to install Django, or we install Django. So all you're going to do is say pip install Django. But before you do that, we use a specific version of Django. We use Django 2.2. So when we do that, instead of just saying Django, we want to make sure we do 2.2 because there are specific things that we will end up using that aren't going to work with 3 or kind of aren't. There's still some bugs. And as you guys get into Python, you're going to start learning that you don't always want to use the newest and latest and greatest version of something. Why is that? Well, it's because, and we kind of talked about it with ES5 and ES6 when we talked about JavaScript, because it's not tried and true yet, right? There's things that older code bases that still rely on certain things. So in your job, you might not immediately go to Django 3 or 4 or whatever it is. You might stay at 2.2 until some sort of get fixed, or something of that nature, or whatever your company wants to do. So you don't always want to download the newest, latest, and greatest Django. Cool. So pip install and then the name. What you can do if you want a specific version, you can say something like this. So I ran. Here we go. I'm just going to clear this. I know that this is tiny, so I'll make sure it's bigger. But you can run like this: pip install Django equals 2.2. That is saying I want to install Django, and the version I want to install is 2.2. Down the road, you might run into some issues if you install something different. So I would say still stick with 2.2, but this is pip. Pip is just a package installer. It's a way that we can install something for our Django. You can kind of think about it like if you've got a car and you want to install like a new exhaust pipe or one of those little wings that sits on the back that I don't actually know what it does that for. It'd be like the guy who installs it, right? You just say, I want to go install it. They go, they get the parts and they put it onto your car. Yeah, Frank, you can actually install it from anywhere, or you can, but that is a global. So if you install anything, just like pip install, that will be a global installation. Now we're going to talk about virtual environments where we can install specific things in a specific environment. That's a great question. Again, if you just install something like this, if you were to just type pip3, again, I have pip3 because I'm a Mac, install Django, that means on your computer globally, you will have access to Django. That's not always what we want to do. Maybe we want to use a different version, right? And we don't want our versions to get confused, or maybe we want to use Flask. If that's the case, we can create something called environment. The way I like to think about environments is this. I don't know if you guys are outdoorsy or not. I used to be a little bit more outdoorsy than I am now, but I used to love to go hiking, right? And with hiking, there are different types of hikes. There's hikes in the winter. There's ice climbing hikes, right? If you are in the Seattle area, we have a really cool volcano called Mount Rainier. And if you're going to hike that, you've got to have a bigger jacket, regardless if it's summer or not. There's always snow there. It's super tall. You have to have an ice pick. You have to have the right equipment, metal spikes for your shoes. Cool. That's one type of hiking. But I used to also live in New Mexico where it gets super hot, the desert, right? And so if I'm going to go hiking there, I want to make sure that I can tailor my hiking backpack to what I need. Right? I don't need an ice pick if I'm going to go hiking in New Mexico. I don't know if there's ever been ice in New Mexico, right? I don't need metal spikes to hike icebergs. I only need specific things. So the way we can do that, you can kind of think about it like a backpack. We create our virtual environment. And so what that does is it allows us to kind of confine only the things that we need within this environment. So if I'm working with Django, I can make sure that I add Django into my environment, but it's not a global thing. It's not going to mess up other programs. I'm not installing and having what we call bloat by having all these packages I don't actually need to use for a project. I can make sure that I install it just in my backpack that I need. And so anytime I need that for a project, I just activate my environment and I go. So how do I do that? Well, there's a great section on the platform called virtual environments that talk through that. But basically what we are going to do is we're going to, and I already have done it, but I will. Please, should not have done that. Oops. There's deactivate, not exit. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Python folder. Now, if you guys have a Python folder, I would hope that you do. If not, I would make a Python folder within your coding dojo and let's navigate there. Does anybody remember what the command is if I want to change my directory, if I want to navigate somewhere? CD. Yeah, great job, guys. I'm a CD. I know I'm a CD into my desktop. I'm going to go in instruction. I'm going to go to June. And I think that's it. If I want to see what's inside of June, what is the one that I use? Yep, LS. So let's see what it is. Cool. So I have my environments and I have week 1. So in your Python folder, you should have one called my environments. Now, one thing students get confused on is they think that they need to create an environment for every project. And that's not the case, especially in Coding Dojo. We're only going to have one environment. Now, in programming, you might have a Flask application and a Django application. In that case, you would need more than one environment. For what we're doing, you just need to create one environment. So I'm going to CD into my environments. Now, what we'll do there, once you're in that folder, you're going to run this script. If you're on Mac or Linux, you're going to run Python 3-mvenv, and then the name of your environment. This is just an arbitrary name. You can call it py3env. You can call it Django if you want, because we're going to create a Django environment. It doesn't matter. So once you do that, oops, I keep putting the wrong thing. I should have something like this. This is my environment, right? Here's my name, py3env. I just did it for continuity, so that way it made sense. But here's my environment. Now, you can see that this is the base. That means I don't have access to anything within that environment right now. I'm just kind of on my base global computer. If I want to activate my environment, say I want to grab my backpack to go on that specific hike, all I do is I run this. I make sure that I'm in the correct folder. Then I say, because I'm on Mac, right? And here's the different prompts. If you want to use PowerShell or Git Bash, the command prompt. Mac or Linux, you say source. You say the name of whatever you called your environment, /bin/activate. Now, immediately you see that it has py3env. That says my environment is activated. Base, I think, is actually from like a GitHub thing. But now my environment is activated. So now I have access to all the things that I've installed via pip into my environment. So I've already installed Django. We've seen how you can do that. But if I want to see what I've installed, I can say pip list. And pip list gives me a list of everything that I've installed. Now you're going to see this warning here a lot because pip is all like always getting updated. Don't really worry about it unless you have like, version 9. Maybe you should update that. But like 19 and 21, I'm not fretting about that. There's not really, I'm not very stressed about that. Again, if you're like at 11, maybe you should update. And then you would just run this guy right here. You can just copy paste. But you can see in this pip list, I've got Django. The version is 2.2. I have pip full that's installed. Great. Pipes and SQL parse. Those are things that when I installed Django, it also installed those. And then I have setup tools here. Now, Frank asked a great question of what does pip freeze do? Easy E. Pip freeze actually just shows the package that I've installed. Not, as you can tell, it's not pip and it's not the setup tools that kind of comes built in, but it actually has just the package I installed. When I installed Django, these are the things that it installed. This is going to be my database. I don't actually know what PyTZ does. That's okay. You don't need to. And I have Django, my framework. So that is an environment. Now, when I want to run some sort of Django application, I now have access to Django because it's in my environment. Does that make sense? Any questions on this? How do you open the virtual environment in Visual Studio Code? It'd be the same thing in the terminal. Let's say I was here and I had this, I ran a terminal. I already have this open in my project, but here I would do I'm in my Django. Don't want to do that. Do this one. I refresh. New terminal. Wait. Okay, great. So all I would do, I know that I need to go back one. I need to go back two, actually. I can see my environments. And then I'm going to say source. Source. I3 env bin. Wow, my terminal is being so slow in this. Activate. So once I run this, I don't know why it's being so slow. This now you can see Py3 env. So you just navigate where you want to go within the terminal. If you wanted to do it in here, you can always just run it here as well. Any questions on this environment? Again, you only need one for this course. So you don't need to create a new environment with every project. You just go, activate it. Now, if I want to go do something in my other thing, now I have my environment open. I can actually just CD out, CD into lecture 1. Week 1. And then now I'm in my environment. It's activated, but now I'm in my folder if I want to run this project, which will come up when we get into actual Django. Any questions on environments?
So do you create the environment first before you like put anything else in there? Let's say.
Yeah, so you create your environment and then you use your pip to install things like Django, or we're going to use something called bcrypt, which we're going to install. So you want to install that within your environment. It's confined, right? You want to add that to that specific backpack. If I'm going to go backpacking on a glacier, I only want to add my ice picks to that backpack. I don't want to add it to all my backpacks.
So you can have like one environment with different thing, like you can install Django and Flask at the same time, or if you wanted to have those two, you could just have environment for Django and then the environment for Flask.
Yeah, so look, if I were to do something like this, deactivate, okay, and now we're going to say, or say something like let's say I had a Flask, right? Because I'm teaching Flask coming up pretty soon anyway. So what I could actually say is this: I can say Python 3 -m venv, say I'm an environment. I'm actually going to call it Flask. It's creating my environment now called Flask. Cool. So now I can source Flask /bin /activate. Now I'm in Flask and I can say pip install Flask.
Okay.
So now if I were to say pip list, you'll see Flask and Jinja markup safe pip, but you don't see that Django, right? So if I'm ever working in a project that just needs Flasks, I go and I activate my Flask environment and have access to all this information. I go, oh, I don't want that. I actually want to deactivate, and I want my project to just be my Django one. Well, then I just say Py3 source, because I'm still in my environment folders, Py3 env bin /activate. Activate. Now I'm in my Py. If I say pip list, just have Django. I don't have Flask. So environments is a cool way that we can add different things. If I want to add, if I'm doing Python and I'm loving Django and I'm creating a web application, and then somebody says, hey, can you work and work with these numbers and create some sort of data structure, or let's say some graph. Okay, well, I might use something called NumPy or Pandas. Well, I can go create an environment that maybe it's called data science that has access to all that information. And the reason we want to do that is that way our environment doesn't have bloat from all these projects it has downloaded, right? It's just, but it's not like carrying one massive backpack with everything. Instead, we have our little backpack that has the things for our specific hike that we need. Yeah. So Jordan asked, so the purpose of virtual environments is to have different tools for different types of projects stored in one place. Yeah, basically, right? It allows us to pick and choose which tools we want to use for our environment and not have to download everything. If we're not going to use Flask, well, we don't need the code bloat to have all that downloaded, right? We don't need, our computer doesn't need to parse through all that information. We want to make it as efficient as possible. That's where virtual environment comes in. Nathan asked, in my terminal, when I'm not in the environment, I don't have the base prefix. I don't know why that does say that, but I wouldn't worry about it. As long as when you get into your environment, it has your actual environment name, you should be fine. I don't know why mine says base. I'll have to look at that after. Kevin asked, do those packages ever compete? Might one override if they were both in the same environment? Yeah, that could happen, right? Dependencies can change. That's why you do an environment, right? So maybe the way you write it could be read a different way or something weird, some sort of dependency, right? If you need access to something in Flask, like needs access to, or let's say, for example, I don't think that this works, but if you do bcrypt is something we're going to use to hash passwords when we get them into our database and make them kind of, instead of it saying password, it says like 245 19 24 3, whatever, that whole long string. Maybe bcrypt doesn't work with Flask installed. I don't think that's true, but maybe it doesn't, right? And so this is a way that we can kind of control our environment and make sure, okay, we're just limiting any sort of ways for something to get confused and to break on me. Great questions, guys. These are really great questions.
I don't know if this is not a repeat question, but you can have, like, you can install Django and Flask in the same environment and still use it.
Yeah, you can. I wouldn't suggest that because they're two different things, though. So whenever when we get to Django, we'll see this. When you start a Django project, it's different than how you start a Flask project. And so there are requirements for each. And so the way you even start a project has to be unique to Django and or Flask and the way that it reads, right? So once I start a project in Django, because I'm using that framework versus the micro framework of Flask, it has an automatic understanding of even the word templates. That's where we're going to put all of our HTML. It has to be that word templates. Can't be capitalized, can't not have an S. It has to be that, right? Flask uses templates too, so it's not a great example, but it is a way that we want to make sure that we limit any sort of competition between those.
Okay, so good practice is at least to have like different environment for each of them if you're gonna be using them both.
Yeah, I mean, you might have an environment in Flask that might use bcrypt and an environment of Django that also uses bcrypt, and that's okay. You can have both installed, but you want to make sure that just what you need for this environment or for this project has, like your backpack just has that. Think about, again, like hiking. You don't want to pack too much, right? If you're going on a big long hike, you don't want to overpack. It's not good. It's slower. So here's the same thing: is we don't need to pack things that we don't need. Different environments for different frameworks. Yes, Nathan, absolutely. Definitely different environments for different frameworks. Great questions, guys. How do we feel out of 0 to 1? 1 being really understanding, 0 not understanding. How are we feeling about virtual environments?
Hey, Will, so for our assignments, how many virtual environments will we need?
You just really need one.
Just one? Okay, just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, you just need one.
Hey, Will.
Yeah.
um, So when I in my virtual environment, so when I downloaded and everything, so like you showed here, so when I did the peep list, I before I had the Django as well with the peep and pipes, but I think I accidentally did something like deactivated or something. But now I don't have the Django here, only the peep pipes and the setup tools.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Why
how
don't
can I?
after class, I'd be happy to kind of help with you.
All right.
Yeah, we
All
can
right.
walk through that, make sure your environment's all set up correctly.
All right. Thank you.
Jordan, yes. Absolutely. There's so many different things that interact in different ways, different dependencies. There's a ton. There's some things that are really great. Some things that are really, really great to know and to have. But yeah, they can differ very like a lot. Cool. Let's go ahead and move on. So we have talked about, where's my VS Code? Oh, I think I shut it down because it was making me frustrated. This terminal is not working. Yeah, Nathan, you can use libraries sort of like that. So Nathan asked, does Python use libraries like JavaScript? Yeah, that's actually one of the big benefits is that Python has so many libraries like NumPy or Pandas that you can access code. It's just like jQuery, right? You can access code that you don't have to write, but you have access to it. That's where Django as a framework comes in. And then that's where like Flask is a micro framework, kind of act the same way as a library. But there are tons of libraries. That's again why Python is really, really popular, because you can build a lot of really powerful stuff just implementing a library or two and not having to do very much code. You can create, there's a great thing on YouTube where you can create a application that does web scraping, meaning that it goes to a specific website, scrapes for specific data, and you can build it within about an hour with very little code, maybe 100 or 200 lines of code. And what it actually does is you bring in some like a web scraper, and you bring in some libraries, and it will actually act as a like a voice assistant. So you can say, in this example, it was web scraping some website for COVID deaths, and you could verbally say how many COVID deaths happened in Canada, and then it would spit back as like an assistant. There are currently, X amount of COVID deaths in Canada. And that's just using libraries. Image recognition, another really popular thing for that. Great questions, guys. Okay. One thing I do want to point out is how we would actually run Python. So before I can even do that, one thing I want to note is when we are creating, this was from our office hour, when we're creating a Python file, as you kind of guessed, it's the name .py. Now, again, don't use numbers, don't use spaces, anything like that in your name. Just use a word if you want to do like a snake case is what I think it's called. You can do that, but I would just stick with one full name. And then at the end, if you want to create an actual Python file, it's just .py. So here you can even see that my VS Code knows that this is a Python file. I got my little snake right here. Cool. So I've got a Python file, and there's a couple of things that I can do to actually run it. So let's say I'm here and I want to create a variable that just says will. Well, in JavaScript, the way I would actually do that is by saying var, right? I'm declaring a variable. What's really nice in Python is you actually don't even have to put var. You just put your variable name. So if I say first name equals will, does anybody remember what kind of data type this is? Yeah, that's string. Well, Mark, you're quick. Cool. So if I say first name will, and then I say print, print is the same thing as console log. One thing I really want to point out today and tomorrow and Wednesday is just kind of the differences of things you already know. They're just something called something different, right? So if I just want to print first name, perfect. So now I've got this code right here that is got a first has a variable called first name that is a string type will, and then I want to print that. Now there's a couple ways that I can do that. Well, I can come in here and I can get to that specific area. So I want to CD into week 1 and lecture 1. And then now that I'm in my folder, that is lecture 1 right here, you can see that. I'm going to clear. What I can actually just say is Python. And then I give the actual file name. So I can say main.py. Now you can see it just says will. Pretty simple. Very, very easy way to run that. Same thing. You can run it in the terminal here. If I were to say terminal, it's probably going to spit at me, but I'm going to say Python. Now, again, as a Mac, you can say dot Python 3, but Python 2 is working for me, so it's fine. But here I print and it will run this file here. Great way to run code. This is what I would really suggest you guys, as you can, because I want you to get used to doing the terminal. I would say start running your Python code this way. One thing, yes, it does, Jordan. It does. Jordan asked if that runs with Bash as well. So yes, you can do that same thing. You just run the Python and then the name like that. One thing I want to note, do not use Code Runner. Code Runner can cause a lot of problems. And it's a great example of there are some tools that are really, really great for certain languages, but not as great for others. So it's a lot of students like to use Code Runner. There's some different JSON settings dependency issues that can happen. It can really stress people out. So make sure you just don't do that because it works great for JavaScript, just not great for Python. So what you can do is you can run it in the terminal. Do not do Code Runner. There's also a wonderful website, especially when you get into like your loops. That's called Python Programming. Oh, not Python Programming. Python Tutor. Thank you, Nathan. It's Python Tutor. Python Tutor. The Python Tutor will actually help you visualize and you can run your code, which is really cool. So if I'm here and I'm in my Python Tutor, write code in Python 3.6, I can write my code. So I can say first name. Well, this is a little bit more for like actual like for loops, but you can run your code and your for loops through Python Tutor. That's another great way to run it. You can also do something called the shell, and the shell is something that we will get used to. And so I, don't do your entire assignment in the shell, but I think there are some shell assignments for you to kind of get used to. And the shell is basically a way that I actually don't have to go into a text editor to create Python code. I can actually just do it by typing Python 3. Once I type Python 3, you see these 3 lines right here. That tells me I'm in my shell. I have created, I can kind of create it as like I am in a Python file. So I can actually just say x equals will. And then I can say print x. And it will print will. So I can create variables. I can run that here. Now, it will remember all my variables and everything here as long as the shell is open once I close the shell. So if I say exit, and then I say Python 3, and then I say, print x, it's going to give me an error that says I don't know what x is. So it only lives if you declare a variable within the shell. It will only live within that life of the shell. Once you click exit, you will have to redefine everything like that. But it is actually a cool way if your friends, you can do simple things like 4 + 3. If you need a quick calculator, just type Python and it'll do that math for you. So it's just quick. That's called the shell. Another way to run Python code. If you don't really want to write a file, you just want to run or do some sort of math, it will run that as well. But I would focus on starting to run it in the Python and then giving the name of the file like we had, like this. Run that there and it will run that for you. Any questions on how to run Python? Again, I know this is very kind of basic when we're getting into it. It might feel like, well, why are we talking about this? This is simple stuff, but I just want to make sure that you guys have the fundamentals down. because then on Wednesday, we're going to really start kicking it up as we get into conditionals and the dictionaries. And then we kind of go from there. We introduce object-oriented programming next week. The big day. That's why Python is great. And then we introduce something called MySQL, which is some databases. So just so you know, today's kind of easier, and it gets progressively harder and harder, and kind of just goes straight up from here. Cool. Any other questions on the shell or how to run Python? Cool. Well, we've already printed some strings. And so I just wanted to point out there's a few things that we can do. We can do concatenation, or we can use something called an F string. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, here, what if I wanted to say something like this? I wanted to say hello plus whatever name I wanted to do. Well, I could do hello plus first name. I save this. There we go. And then I say Python main.py. And it'll say hello Will. Notice it concatenates. It adds my two strings together. But notice that I forgot to put a space here. And so now if I were to run this again, I now have this. This is what we call string concatenation. This is a string, adds it to this as a string. We did this in JavaScript, just kind of walking through this information. Now there is something we can do called an F string. Now, this is my favorite way to do it. It makes sense. It's called string concatenation. Concatenation. To concatenate something is to add it together. Am I going too fast? If I need to slow it down, absolutely, please tell me, and I can definitely slow it down. We don't have too much to go through after this. Cool. Cool. So that is string concatenation. Now, I'm not a fan of that because I think it looks sloppy and it's kind of hard. If you forget a space, that kind of sucks. Whatever. There's something else that we can do, that we can introduce the F string. Now, this is why it's really important to do like a Python 3, because if you just do Python 2, if that's your default, the F string was introduced into Python 3. So if you're running, Python 2.6, it's not going to be able to run this code. So make sure you are doing Python 3, or you're, have Python 3 something installed, and that's what your default is. So if you're ever getting the error and it's not doing it, it's probably because you need Python 3 installed, or you need to write Python 3 if you're on Mac. But what we can do is we can actually just do what we call an F string. So I can say F. Then what I can do is I can do this. I can come, and it's kind of like we did in JavaScript, is I can now call my variable value within my string. So all I do is put this F that tells my computer, hey, I'm going to have some sort of variable call within this string. Once it sees this curly bracket, it goes, oh, here's the beginning of my variable name. Curly into the curly bracket, here's the end. Okay, this first name is that first name. So now if I were to run this, it should say the same thing. Hello, Will. Now I love this because, as you can see from the first one, I forgot about spacing, or if you need to add multiple things, this is a way that I can add a ton of them. If I wanted second name equals Mel. So if I said, oh man. It's an easy way that I can have the correct punctuation. I can do everything I need instead of having to worry about concatenating different and adding different variables. So now I can say this. I can just call those variables. It doesn't matter what order I'm in. Now I can call those variables, run that, and it says, hello, Mel. My name is Will. Any questions on this? It will work. It doesn't just have to be strings. It will work with numbers as well. So if I said something like age, and I said currently I would say something like this, and I were to run this again, you can see that it takes that integer. Now, when it does this, it actually adds it and makes it a string, but we won't necessarily worry about that right now. But here you can see it's much easier to do that and to call those within using the F string than it is to see the string concatenation. Any questions on this?
How do you print again in a terminal from the VS?
Yeah, so all you do is make sure you're in your folder that has your Python file.
Mhm.
And then when you do that, you just do Python or Python 3. I have Python 3 by default, so that's what my computer's running. If you don't, that's where that Python 3 comes in. And then you say the file name. So within this folder, I have a file name of main py right here. And when I say Python main py, it goes and it runs everything in this file.
Even in
As long as
okay, I see it.
here's my folder, which is lecture 1. My file is within that. Therefore, it runs this code. Does it make sense?
Does it work with Git Bash?
Yep. You might need to use Python 3. Did you download Python 3?
I think so. I downloaded the one they said on the platform 3.6.4, I think.
Okay. After class, I can walk through. If this isn't working specifically, just this, I can walk through that with you after class, after a night. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Cool. All we have left today, guys, is I just wanted to do a few things. We've talked about that. Let's talk about declaring variables. You've already seen it. I don't have to say var. I can actually just do the variable name. That is a declaration. And then I can just say the value. Now, if I wanted to change age, again, I would just say age equals 30 or whatever that is. So here, I don't know why that D is yellow. That's kind of weird. If I just had like age equals 30, it looks the same, but this is just me redeclaring my variable of age to a different value. So variables are super simple. What's nice about Python is it's very simple. There's the least amount of code. They say it's like a language that's closest to talking in English. That's why a lot of people love it. It's pretty simple to pick up from there. Now, I did want to talk, the last thing I really want to talk about is sort of the basic data types. And then we'll talk about type conversion. We go about for another 10 minutes max. And then we're going to talk about type conversion, pretty simple. And then we're going to push our code to GitHub. Now, moving forward, I want you to push all your code to GitHub. That's how I want you to submit assignments. So we're going to walk through how to do that together again. So that way you guys know how to do this. And I want you to start getting used to GitHub because it's something that you will absolutely need. Cool. So I want to point out the different types. Now, there's a great article. I don't know why I said that. There's a great section here on the platform called data types. And it walks through what we call primitive data types and then our composite data types. We're going to focus on primitive. We might talk a little bit about composite. We're going to focus really on primitive. And there's 3 real ones, real kind of main sections. There's some subsections in there, but 3 main ones. First one is a Boolean value, which we know is just either true or false within our computer. And the way we do true is it's a capital T and a capital F for false. If you do a lowercase f or a lowercase t, it's not going to work. That is one thing that Python is picky about. So make sure it is this true or false. That is your Python, or that is your Boolean values. It also has numbers. Now it's got 3 different types of numbers. It's got what we call integers, and that's any whole number. So here we have age 35. That is what Python, you don't have to declare it in any certain way. That's, as you know, or just so you know, that's just how Python is kind of in the back end declaring it to itself. But a whole number is what we call an integer, or int. And that's just any whole number. We also have what we call a floating point number. And so that is just any decimal. So anything that's a decimal number, that decimal will be known to Python as a float. And then the last one is a complex number. Unless you're getting into data science, you won't use a complex number. It's a combination of real and imaginary numbers. It's very sciencey. I've never used them in my life, but Python is great for science and really complex science, machine learning, stuff like that. So that's why it does. That's why it's really kind of one of the leaders in data science, but it does take in complex numbers. You don't have to know that. Again, unless you're doing some really deep learning or some sort of data science stuff, but you can definitely read the documents on that. The two that you will, really, you're going to deal with integers and sometimes floats. That's it. And then lastly is just strings. Now, string is just a literal text, right? That is just, we know strings, we've done that. And so you guys know what a string is. Now, when we talk about type conversion, there might be sometimes that I have a string like this, right, that somebody has given me. And like I said, when I ran this, it actually converted this to a string. So if I were to talk about the type, or if I were to read this, this is all part of a string, right? Let's say I wanted it to go from here. Oh my gosh, why might be so slow? Let's say I wanted, this is of type string. Let's say I wanted to convert that into an int. How would I do that? Does anybody know? We just do this. Int age. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Nathan and Jordan. Yeah, great. So I would int, and then what do I want to do? Age, right? So I am telling it, I want this variable's value to be converted into type integer, meaning I want this to be a number. Now this will come in handy because by default, when we deal with a form, every form information will come in as a string. And so we might actually have to change it to an integer. That's where this comes in handy. So even if on a form, we have a dropdown, right, or age is a great one. If somebody on a form types in, I am 29 years old, when we take that data from our form, it will come to us as a string. So I might have to, especially I will have to change it to an integer. And so this is how you would do that. Same thing if I wanted this to be a float, I would just call it that. You can change a number to a string, as you see by string. You can do anything you need by type conversion. And so, or yeah, str, sorry. No, I think it's string. I think it's string, and then str is JavaScript, believe. And so that's just converting. You're converting this to a string. No, you might be right. str does make more sense. Let's see. The return value of string must be used. See, that's a real number. I think it's not liking it because I'm converting it to a string, but I'm not doing anything with it. I don't know why I didn't tell if it was number, but here we are. If we want to do that, if we want to do type conversion, you can absolutely do that through those three different things. And those are the basic types that you're going to deal with. The one you will likely do the most of is your int, because when you take in information from a form, you will likely just take in a string for a number, and you will want to convert that to an int. Cool. Somebody asked, how do you write comments? Just a pound sign. I do the command or control question mark, but it's just the pound sign. That's how you would write a comment in Python. Any other questions? Yeah, you were right, Nathan. It actually is str. So if you want to convert into a string, it is just str. String, it was calling some function called string. str is the way you would convert into a string. Good job. Cool. Any other questions? That's basically all I had for today. I know that there was a lot. Again, we went through a ton with pip. We went through a ton with virtual environments. We declared some basic data types. We're going to talk about the composite data types of a tuple, a list, a dictionary. Just a little heads up: a list is the same thing as an array, right? They operate basically the same way. As an array in JavaScript. It's just a different name. Yes, Kevin, we will be pushing to Git. Dictionary. Anybody know what this would be in JavaScript?
Object.
Yeah, it's just an object. That's it. So again, as you guys are going through this, don't get too intimidated, right? Because you already have dealt with arrays and you've dealt with objects. They're just called lists and dictionaries in this one. So don't get too caught up with that. And here you can actually run, there's a built-in function called type that will give you what type it is. Is it a dictionary? Is it a float? Is it a string? Is it a whatever? Which is kind of cool. So if you wanted to see what type, like let's say your form wasn't working, and you're like, oh, what is this? You can run type and that will give you the type, whatever that is. And then we're going to talk about functions. We're going to talk about this stuff, functions and conditionals on Wednesday. Any other questions on what we talked about today before I push everything to GitHub? How you guys feeling about Python? Somebody asked. Yeah, Nathan, after this, I've got 2 people in line, but then I can absolutely help you. I think Mel's also here. Mel, what time are you here till?
I'm here for another hour.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So Mel can also help
Yep.
with that homework question for you, Nathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Yeah, Kevin, it is easy to pick up at the beginning, especially now that you already have the knowledge of arrays and of objects and of kind of how variable declaration comes in. There's a little few things like environments, but if you can kind of pick up what an environment is, I promise you it's not that crazy. Especially this week. This week, if you look at the assignments, a lot of them are actually just redoing the assignments you've already done, but just in Python code. So like this functions too, you're just creating a function that returns 5. And then what is this? Runs a function, returns 5 plus 5, so that just prints 10. So it's just kind of going through same things. It looks different, I promise it looks different, but it is acts the same way as JavaScript. That's all of coding, which is cool as you guys learn this stuff. Cool. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to push this to GitHub so that way we can practice and how you would do this. Okay, so I've got my project here. I've got my lecture 1. That is my folder structure. Perfect. We have that information. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to actually cancel this so we can start from the beginning. I'm going to make sure that I can get there for you guys. That way you know how to do this. Okay, so I am starting. This is a brand new terminal. I haven't done anything. I didn't use any Django, so I don't need my environment or anything like that. I just need to get to the folder that I have all this in. So I know that I need to go into my desktop. In my desktop, I have a folder called instruction. In my instruction, I got a folder called June. And again, this is just off the top of my head. This is what I know. If I wanted to go look at it, I could. inside June, I've got, if I just press tab, it'll tell me what I have. Okay, I have my environment or week 1. So I want to go into week 1. And then if I press tab again, lecture, that's the only one that's in there. So now I'm in my lecture 1. I did that, went from my desktop. On my desktop, there's a folder called instructions DD. Inside there's a folder called June. Inside there's a week 1. Inside there's a folder called lecture 1. Now I'm here. Perfect. So what I first need to do is if I were to type ls, I've got my main.py and my daily agenda marked down. So what I need to do is I need to initialize my repository. I need to create my Git repository on my side. So all I say is I say Git init. What that does is it initializes my repository. Cool. Now I need to add my files to that. What I can do is I can say git add space dot. Git add space dot. That does it adds everything within my folder to my initialized repository. Perfect. I can actually do git status if I want to just make sure that everything worked well. Cool. It recognized my VS Code, daily agenda. These are all new files, main.py. Perfect. Now what I can do is I can say git commit. What git commit does is it says, okay, I have added everything. Now I want to go ahead and commit. I want to basically press save on this, add it to my Git repository on my computer. So I say git commit. Now this -m says that a message is coming. And what do? I just type a message. Now this, if it is your first one, initial commit is popular, first commit. This is also a place that if you added a file or updated something, here's where you could write that, right? Like you added HTML or updated CSS or created Python file, whatever. I'm just going to say initial commit, but this portion in between this parentheses can say whatever you did. So cool. I committed, it creates it. Great. I've done my first 3 steps. I initialized, I added, and I've committed. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to host everything for me on my GitHub. That's just what is a popular one. You can use Gitbucket, you can use GitLab, you can use whatever you want to use. I would say GitHub is probably the most popular. Not probably, absolutely is the most popular. But what I can actually do is I can say, okay, great. I want to say June week 1 lecture 1. So here's my June week 1 lecture 1 repository. Now, I created my repository on my local machine. Now I need to set up a remote repository on a website like GitHub. Please note, GitHub is not Git. Git is local on yours. That is a version control system. GitHub is a place to store your Git repositories remotely so other people can access them, not just on your computer. This repository name can be anything you want. I would suggest it should be your assignment name, whatever your assignment name is. In this case, this was just my lecture, so I'm going to say June week 1 lecture 1. Now you have to make it public. That way I can actually view it. And then you can add a description if you want. You don't necessarily need to. For your assignments, you don't need to, but it's great to start kind of adding different things. You can add a README later. You can add a git ignore. You can add a license git ignore. If you add a file in there, whenever we start working with like APIs, stuff like that, you might want to do git ignore to put your API keys to make sure that those aren't uploaded to GitHub. A README is just a description of what your application does, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes in READMEs, but it's just a description of what your application does, what you know, kind of problems you ran into. It's a great way for people to, kind of, you know, if you have a public repository that people can see, it's a great way to like, okay, what am I looking at? What are your issues? That's where open source stuff comes in, but don't worry about that right now. And then a license, basically, if you do have an open source telling people what they can use your code for, XYZ. So now that I've given a repository name, I don't need to do anything other than make sure it's public. I'm going to say git or create repository. Cool. Now it gives me this screen right here. It gives me this link called GitHub/Cody Calhoun. My middle name's Cody. And then my repository name .git. Perfect. Now I have 2 options. I can create a new repository on the command line, or I can push to an existing repository from the command line. Now we've already created our repository, right? That's where our git init, our add, and our commit came in. And so I actually just need to push to an existing repository. It already has been created. That's the way I like to do it. I like to initialize and create my repository and then create my GitHub. That's just how I operate. Feel free to do whichever is best for you. So what I do is I need to run these three things in my terminal. Now, especially this one, I would always copy paste, because if you miss one thing, it can be a world of panic and hurt. Where I would say at the beginning, if you miss one thing, if you try to type it and it is wrong, just go into GitHub, delete. It's going to make sure you like, are you sure you want to delete? Are you double sure you want to delete? Just delete it and start over, because it can be a real big pain, especially if you're beginning at this. So I always say, just copy it, go here, paste it. Now, if you're in Windows, you might have to right click and paste, because sometimes keyboard shortcuts don't work. But I'm in my lecture one. I say this git remote add origin. That is the one that adds and connects my repository on my computer to this online repository. Then I've got another one called git branch big M main. That is saying the main branch that I have, and in projects and algorithms, you'll go through branches a lot more in depth, but you can kind of think about it as a pipeline, like the main code that I'm focusing on. I'm going to call that one main. And so I'm just going to run that one. And so now, kind of like a commit, we want to say, okay, I want to save this. Good to go. Now, this is the last one. I'm just going to type it. Get that. Luckily, if I would have said git ush -u origin main, it would have just said that doesn't make sense. The real big one that you cannot have a typo in is this HTTPS GitHub link. So now this is me saving, committing, perfect. Oh, actually I did a period. So perfect. Okay, cool. So now I have done that. So if I go here and I actually refresh this, you can see all my code. I initialized it 5 minutes ago. Here's my thing that I said, right? Initial commit, daily agenda, main.py. Perfect. You can see my code. This is the beginning of a Python course. My name, age, second name, what you do, and then I'm taking string to age. Now, one thing I want to note is, let's say you do that and I go in and I change something on my project, right? So I want to add a second.py. Sealed. Let's rename it. Or let's say, let's not even worry about that. Let's say I want to, because you're not going to necessarily do that. Let's say I add some code, right? I say student equals Jordan. Perfect. Let's say that's all I add. Well, I don't need to go and initialize, because I've already initialized, I've already created it. I don't need to recreate anything. I make sure I save it. Now, all I do is I say git add, git commit. I don't need to initialize. I've already done it. So I say git add, git commit, added student. Cool. It says that one file was changed, but 2 insertions. Now, I've already created that remote repository. I've already linked them together. So all I have to do now is say git push. Because that last one here that said, well, now I can't see it, but it said git push -u origin main. By saying that is it's saying, okay, anytime I say git push, I want you to push to that main branch. So now I say not pit push. Be a good band name though. Git push. If I say that, cool, good to go. I refresh. And now you can see student Jordan is there. And if I were to go back, now in this one, it says I have added student, right? So it changes that. So that way, when people are reading it, They can say, oh, this is what I did. Or if you're working with a group, you have 2 commits. The first one was committed 8 minutes ago, called initial commit. Here's the second one, added student. What did it do? It added this line and Jordan here. So if you do update a project, you don't have to initialize, you don't have to link them again together. All you have to do is just add it. You still have to add it, you still have to commit it, and then you just push it. Any questions on this? And this is all recorded, so don't worry, this is all recorded. I know it takes a little bit of getting used to. I will actually make a document tomorrow outlining the steps on what you should do for you guys. Just like an entire Git document that should already be in your, if you actually go to Web Fundamentals, that is.
Hey, Will,
Yeah.
just curious, could you can even like add everything from your VS Code, right? From your
Yeah.
VS Code terminal, like just
Yeah, your terminal.
yeah.
So here you can see that you've got a whole bunch of stuff of adding. Now, if you see master, master is what it used to be called. Now it's called main. So if you see master and main, those are substituted. Yeah, here's how you, and you can get to cloning. You don't necessarily need to do that right now, but here's what all this stuff does, but you can use remote repositories. Here's my boss, Devin, giving an entire kind of walkthrough of what is GitHub, why do you use GitHub, all kinds of great stuff. But I'll also make something for you guys that kind of just has all the different steps of Git init, Git add, Git whatever for you guys. I'll make that tomorrow. Cool. Any other questions, my friends? I know this one was a long one today. We had a lot of stuff to go through. Any other questions?